Welcome to Finding Your Inner Mr. Rogers. I'm Todd Faber, and I believe that in a world of noise and speed, the most radical thing we can be is kind. We often think of leadership as being in charge, but Fred Rogers taught us that true leadership is about being in service to the dignity of others. Our guest today is Jane Steinmetz, a trailblazing executive who proves that corporate leadership achieves its ultimate success when it serves the community. As a managing partner of Ernst & Young's Boston office, Jane oversees thousands of consulting, tax, and assurance professionals impacting the global economy. She's the first woman in Boston's history to lead a Big Four professional services firm. Beyond her corporate oversight, Jane previously chaired the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, now sitting on the executive committee. She also serves on the boards of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston and the Boston Foundation. Her leadership is defined by a fierce commitment to equity, youth mentorship, and systematic inclusion. By driving the expansion of E&Y's Neurodiverse Center of Excellence, Jane has pioneered workplace pathways for individuals with cognitive differences. She is the catalyst for potential in our neighborhood, a corporate captain who demonstrates that the true economic growth is driven by expanding the boundaries of who we value, who we hire, and who we empower. Welcome to the neighborhood, Jane.
Thank you so much, Todd, for that lovely introduction and for having me on this podcast.
You are very welcome. I am thrilled that you agreed to do this. I know when we first talked, you didn't think that you belonged here, but trust me, you 100% belong in this neighborhood, and I am just absolutely thrilled to be able to have this conversation with you today.
Wonderful. Me too.
So let's get into it. You made history. You were the first woman to lead a Big Four accounting firm office in Boston. Breaking through an institutional glass ceiling requires an incredible amount of personal resilience. Now, Fred Rogers spent his entire career validating the inner confidence of individuals, reminding them that they are capable of anything that they choose to seek out to do. So when you were climbing the ranks in a traditionally male-dominated industry, where did you find your internal anchor of self-worth when the external landscape didn't necessarily reflect your leadership?
Oh, well, first of all, I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, so I love that you are bringing us back to his wonderful lessons. But at times it wasn't easy. So my anchor was that I really genuinely loved what I was doing. So I always tried to excel at it and really double down and be the best that I could possibly be at what I was doing. That said, there were moments when I wondered whether I would be able to reach that next level, particularly in an environment that was so male dominated at the leadership levels. But I was fortunate that I had mentors and sponsors who really, they encouraged me, advocated for me. They reminded me to keep going. That said, I had some, interesting, what I guess I would call footfalls, where I thought to get ahead, I had to act like those that were already there, that had already arrived. But they were, a lot of guys and they loved their sports and this, that, and the other thing, and that just wasn't me. So when I tried to emulate them, it was a colossal mistake. When I really excelled in it is when I said, you know what, I'm gonna be myself. Win, lose, or draw. And when that happened, that's when really my career took off, because you put down that guard. People see you for who you are, and you start to build those more trusted relationships. So just over time, I learned to stay focused on doing the work, building the trusted relationships, and being myself. And the recognition just followed from there.
I love that. And, Fred Rogers, and I talk about with my daughters like this, and you've got twin girls, obviously. Authenticity, boy, it goes a long way.
It really does.
It really does. And I think that, are there people of different genders who sort of have things in common, whether it's sports or something else? Of course. Mm-hmm. But if you just don't feel that, the fact that you acknowledged it and recognized it and are able to say, hey, you know what? This was a mistake for me. This didn't fit me. I needed to be more authentic, is huge, because that also shows a level of vulnerability to say, hey, we all make mistakes. And we talk a lot about that on the podcast. We talk about How do we acknowledge people's differences? How do we show that it's okay to be different? How do we show that it's okay to be vulnerable? And one of the things that I talked a little bit about in the introduction to you was probably your most impactful initiative, which was bringing the Neurodiverse Center of Excellence to Boston. And you created pathways for individuals with so many cognitive differences, whether it's autism, ADHD, and dyslexia. And Fred Rogers spent decades telling the world that every single person is special just the way that they are, not despite their differences, but because of them. And it's amazing to me that you were able to accomplish this at EY, which is a data-driven, highly structured world of global professional services. And you've come to appreciate that neurodiversity isn't a challenge to accommodate, but an immense competitive advantage to celebrate. And how did that sort of unfold for you?
Well, first of all, well said. It's interesting. When we started our neurodiverse practice and we started hiring more intentionally and deliberately hiring more neurodiverse individuals, at first I thought it was through the lens of inclusion, and it quickly pivoted. I see neurodiversity as a true superpower. It is not a challenge, it is a strength. The individuals that we're hiring are highly, highly intelligent, and they often approach problems in ways that others might not see. So the different lens is not something to work around, it's a strength. It's something to tap into. So when we first started, there was, yes, this inclusion lens that was really on me. My firm had already evolved, and I was like, oh, isn't this nice? We should be doing this. This is something good to do. But it became clear that it wasn't also just a good thing to do. It is good business. I mean, you are right. We are a data-driven, like highly structured environment of professional services, but the ability to solve complex problems differently, that is a competitive advantage, and that is what our neurodiverse colleagues bring to the table. So it just opened up an incredible pool of what might otherwise be untapped talent. And it helped us better understand that building inclusive pathways, it doesn't at all lower the bar. In fact, to the opposite, it expands what excellence can look like. So I am a huge advocate of our hiring practices around neurodiverse individuals, and they are a huge asset to us.
Well, I was thrilled when I read that that's what you guys are doing. My wife, as an
Everybody should do
educator,
it.
yeah,
I can't say it enough. Every single employer, if they are not incorporating ways of hiring neurodiverse individuals, they're missing the boat. They're missing such great talent. You gotta adjust a little bit your hiring practices,
of course.
but it's slight and the return is great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's we tend to be myopic at times with what our expectations are in terms of
Yeah.
what we see, like not on paper but in front of us. And you're
Mm-hmm.
right, having people who think differently, problem solve differently, creates a whole pathway towards excellence and towards solutions for clients. Because ultimately, as a professional services provider, your job is to ascertain what the problem might be,
Mm-hmm.
fix the problem that is, predict the problem that hasn't happened yet. And you can't do that if everybody else is sort of seen as a commodity and treating it the same way, then you're going to be treated as a commodity. But when you bring in people that have a very different mindset and approach, it's hugely important. But it's also being a great corporate citizen by
It is.
opening up to people that have traditionally not been included in the conversation. So
Right.
I kudos to you guys for doing it, because being at a huge firm like this, it was probably not an easy path for you to be able to accomplish this.
Right. When people all think the same, you can develop groupthink and tunnel vision. The last thing you would ever want a client to say is, why didn't you spot that? Why didn't you
Mhm.
see that? right? Like you want to look around corners for your clients. You want to think about everything and all the different angles. And so when you have that diversity of thought, you can really just produce better solutions. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, and that's why you guys are such a well-respected firm in town, other than obviously because of your great leadership. So, um, so thank you for doing that, because it is hugely important. Um, but some of the other things that you've done is you've been a board member of several business associations, like the Massachusetts Roundtable that you, I believe, chaired for a while. You look at macroeconomic policy and talent retention across the state. And you've noted in the past that for Massachusetts to thrive, we have to do a better job of creating policies that support the next generation, making housing and childcare, as an example, just more accessible and more affordable. Fred Rogers' mantra, and I've talked to almost every single person on this podcast about this particular thing, which is anything mentionable is manageable. So when you are sitting with CEOs and legislators, how do you explicitly mention those societal gaps so that the business community can step up and manage better solutions for that next generation?
You know, these issues are very much top of mind of all business leaders, our political leaders, because it just directly impacts our ability to attract, to retain, to develop our talent in Massachusetts. If people can't afford to live here, they can't find affordable childcare, or they don't see a future for themselves or their families here, then our economy it'll just never reach its full potential. So when I'm in conversations with CEOs and policymakers, I try to frame housing, childcare, affordability, not only as a social challenge, but as a core economic competitive issue. And we need talented people to stay. And not just stay here, but thrive here, build their lives here, want to remain here. The encouraging part is that leaders, as I was saying, across both businesses and government, they understand the urgency. They really do. Finding the solutions is the hard part. But there's a lot of attention on this. And the more explicitly we name the gaps, the more effectively we can try to work together to get to find those practical solutions.
How have you found the responsiveness when you've been in these big groups with people really acknowledging the fact that, hey, we have a problem, but how do we really go about solving it?
Yeah, that's, everyone acknowledges the problem. The solution is one where everyone has to come to the table together. And folks acknowledge that too. It is not just the government or not just businesses. It's not just a lot of the not-for-profits that I work for that are trying to lift up folks in different ways. We really have to come all together. Yeah. I love, a lot of the work that I do with the business associations, with organizations like the Boston Foundation that try to make an outsized impact in these societal issues. But it's really bringing that all together. Have we cracked the code? No. Are we moving closer towards solution? I earnestly believe we are.
And that's all you can ask for at this stage, right? As long as we keep moving forward, because it is, these problems have existed far beyond our time on this planet, and they'll probably still exist down the road. But if we can continue to chip away at them, it's hugely impactful. Yeah. And speaking of the idea of helping people thrive, we talk about it in the business community, making it so that people will stay, but there's also the other sort of contingent of folks that you work with, which is our children. And you've been deeply involved with the Boys and Girls Club of Boston, and you've focused heavily on youth mentoring. In your corporate day job, you track, we talked about data, you track these highly complex metrics for Fortune 100 clients, but mentorship is very difficult to measure as a KPI in a spreadsheet, right? How do you measure a return on investment for showing up for a young person? And how has your time been spent mentoring our youth shape the way that you then coach and develop all those 2,000 plus professionals that are under your wing at E&Y?
Yeah, it's the ROI on mentoring. It's just so hard to capture, just in a traditional spreadsheet, right? As you were saying. But when it's done and it's done right, you can feel it. You can feel it in the culture of an organization. You can feel it in the confidence in the people that you're trying to support. I've always believed in being a giver. There's this book about givers, takers, matchers, right? I've always tried to strive towards being a giver, right? And people have helped me throughout my career. And so I do feel like I have a responsibility to do the same for others through mentoring and, importantly, sponsorship as well. In a corporate setting, when leaders take the time to mentor more junior professionals and support their peers, just advocate for others, I just think it sends a powerful message about the organization. It sends a powerful message about its values and its culture. So we have people pulse surveys, right? We send out a survey, we get a lot of data back about how people are feeling about their jobs, about how they're getting supported, their work-life balance. Like, we really do try to track responses associated with a lot of these intangibles. But in my opinion, the real measure is whether people feel seen, whether they feel supported, whether they feel like they're in an environment where they're capable of growing. If you can get that, that's like truly the magic. So I know when I mentor, it's less about a return on investment, and it's more about helping others reach their fullest potential. And just, in a way, it's like speaking to your younger self when you're talking with folks that are earlier on in their career. It's like, wow, if I could have done a redo, I wish someone would have told this to me. You know, that type of and I oftentimes get as much from the conversation as hopefully the folks are that are speaking to me. But when you have an organization filled with leaders that appreciate the need and the benefits of mentoring, I think it just seeps through the culture and it really lifts the organization. But it's so hard to measure.
Well, I love that, and probably to coin a phrase of our mutual friend Colette Phillips, who told me that when I interviewed her about 6 weeks ago, she liked to call it giving without expectation.
Yeah, that's
And that's kind of your ROI for you, in the sense
right.
that if you know that you're mentoring somebody and that they're growing and they're benefiting from your wisdom and your experience, that right there is your ROI, right? Because you don't have there's no concept of reciprocity with that. It was interesting, and I think I may have mentioned this to you when we chatted before. So my dad, Al, was the first recipient of the F. Gorham Brigham Lifetime Achievement Award from the Boston Business Journal for their CFO of the Year awards. And the way I try to describe him, which I would now describe you the same way, is that there are people that come up to you like this,
Yeah.
and there are people that come up to you like this, and then there are people like my dad and like you who do this, right? And that, to me, and it's the balance of all of those things, but the idea of being a giver, especially when you've been the recipient and now you're paying it forward, is a huge component of great leadership, because you want to see the people that you've hired strive and be successful. And when you can play a small part in that by imparting wisdom on them, that's a wonderful thing to do. And that's part of this idea with this podcast, is that's a part of the leadership component here. I mean, there's the kindness and the empathy and the compassion piece of it, which helps you be received well as a great leader. But you also have to have that mindset of, well, this isn't about what's in it for me, it's what's in it for them. And so I love the fact that that's been your mindset and kind of your mantra in terms of how you mentor, because we need that. We need more leaders to look outward as opposed to inward.
And I often think about the give or take or match or philosophy, and there is a school of thought that you have to give, but strategically and thoughtfully so that you don't have burnout. I haven't mastered that. I feel like you give because it's the right thing to do, full stop.
Right.
And, it could be with colleagues, it could be with people who left the firm that I'm still friends with, sons and daughters of my friends. We need to just give back. And
Yep.
we do.
But I will tell you, Jane, you clearly have not burned out from it, because
No, it
when you say
energizes
you
me.
haven't mastered that balance, you have, because you're here, you are having this conversation with me with a big smile on your face, and you can see the enthusiasm as you're thinking through your mind of all the
Yeah.
people that you've helped, right? And that right there is the value. So,
Yep.
um, it's interesting. I'll shift gears a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because you've done so much on the economic side, but you've also served as a corporate member of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and you support climate initiatives. And thinking back before, I mean, we look back when Fred Rogers started, it was before the first Earth Day happened in 1972 or whatever year it was.
Yep.
And but he taught children have a deep reverence for our physical world and our shared responsibility to care for it.
Right.
As a high level senior corporate individual and leader, how do you see the connection between this idea of economic prosperity and our stewardship of the environment, of the actual physical neighborhood that we inhabit?
Yeah, well, I see the connection as imperative. Um, when you think about economic prosperity and environmental stewardship, I don't think they can be separated. I feel strongly that we have a responsibility to protect our environment, our oceans, and our wildlife, full stop.
Yeah.
I often think about the fact that, we're here for a relatively brief period of time. We're just renting this space, as some folks would say. And
Yes.
we have to be stewards of this planet for future generations. The environment and wildlife, they don't have voices in the rooms where many decisions are made, so we have to be that voice. It is painful to see species and ecosystems threatened by man-made hazards. To me, caring for our neighborhood, as you put it, the neighborhood that we inhabit, uh, it means recognizing that a healthy economy depends on a healthy environment, and that our responsibility extends beyond ourselves in that regard. So I find them inseparable.
I love that. And it's true. Um, you know, nobody, if they don't have to, nobody wants to live in a crappy neighborhood,
Right?
right?
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
we want to take pride in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we can balance it better. And the fact that you are taking the role that you're taking, given how many other things you're engaged in, is a
Mm-hmm.
testament not just to you, but also to what we all should be striving to do. We should all be looking beyond our daily operations and say, how do we ensure that the neighborhood in which we work in is thriving, right?
And
Because without it, the rest of it is meaningless. Because to your
right,
point,
really good
we are here
example.
for a short period of time. We are
Yep.
stewards of this planet. Um, and as leaders, we have a responsibility to ensure that our legacy is, in fact, beyond that corporate world that we're in, but that we left this place in if not the same, but better shape than we found it. And
Yeah.
I would encourage people that are listening to the podcast to recognize that, hey, you can do more than simply just work within the confines of your small world, but look at the big picture here. Because a big part of, obviously, the underpinnings of this podcast, Jane, is the idea that we have a shared humanity. And part of that shared humanity is the shared world and neighborhood in which we live. So thank you for your advocacy, because it's a wonderful thing. And like I said, I think more people should take advantage of the opportunity to do it.
When you think about it, I saw on the news today, I think it was, that folks were taking a plunge into the Charles River. And I think that's a good example because on days gone by, that was very polluted.
Yeah.
A lot of people got involved about cleaning it up, and now we have a healthy, thriving Charles River, and folks were um, taking a plunge in it to prove the point. But that is a real tangible example of folks leaning in, making a difference, cleaning it up for future generations. And if we could just keep replicating that, that would
No,
be great.
that is a great example, and I think today probably was a pretty good day to go
I
diving
know.
into it
What a
anyway.
good day. It's better than a polar plunge, right?
No, we don't do that. We tried that when we were in Stockholm. We did one of the cold plunges, and I was like in and out in less than 10 seconds. I'd have a
Yeah.
better time going into York Beach in Maine or a Gunquit. Um, well, listen, I did mention this idea of legacy, and one of my favorite things that Fred Rogers has said is that the greatest thing we can do is help somebody know that they're loved and capable of loving. It just it really resonates with me. Um, when you look past the corporate titles, the boards that you've been involved with, and the well-deserved accolades, what do you hope your ultimate legacy is as a neighbor in the city of Austin?
So definitely not the titles. Those are just titles. What I hope is that my legacy is that I was someone who always tried to do the right thing,
Hmm.
even when it wasn't the easiest thing. I I want to be remembered as a person with a really strong moral compass, someone who lifted up others, held myself to high standards, and then just showed up with integrity as a professional, as a leader, as a colleague, as a trusted advisor, and and as a neighbor to the city of Boston. Mm-hmm.
I think that's wonderful. Um, and I do think that you embody that. I mean, the conversation that we've had today around what you've done, not thinking myopically around, you know, rising up the corporate ladder, acknowledging where you've stumbled, uh, looking at how you can help lift other people up through your own experiences, and provide them insight into ways that they can grow. Then looking at underserved communities, whether it's children through the Boys and Girls Club, whether it's other nonprofits through the Boston Foundation, and then certainly through the environment around looking at that stewardship that we have a responsibility for. And it encompasses that whole idea of this big neighborhood that involves people and places. And I am sure that way down the road, when we're all long gone, that your legacy will stand the test of time because I've seen it. I see how you run your office. I know the people that you work with. And, it's the idea that you put your money where your mouth is, but that you don't take yourself too seriously when you're doing it. And so
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't take myself seriously. But that is what I hope. I hope I'm always treating people with the utmost respect and fairness that they deserve, whatever the situation, no matter how easy or hard it might be in the moment, because that's how I would want to be treated. So,
No, and I think that's great. And that sort of goes to the level of part of what I talk about with the podcast of empathy. That when you can treat people not just the way you'd want to be treated, but the way they should be treated, there's a level of empathy in that with leaders that we're still not seeing as much, and which is what I'm trying to highlight with all of you that I've been interviewing because you all embody that. You embody the idea that, hey, I'm not going to take myself too seriously. I'm going to look at myself as on a level playing field with everybody else. I understand where they're coming from in some respects, and if I don't, I'm still going to treat them with kindness. And we need more people like you in the neighborhood. And I am so very much appreciative of the fact that you have joined our neighborhood, and you are welcome to stay as long as you would like. So,
well, thank you for doing this and having this podcast to highlight behaviors and versus just outcomes and profits. Like I just herald what you're doing. So thank you.
Well, it's easy when I find people like you in Boston and around the world. So thank you
Perfect.
again. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Take care, Jane.
Thank you.